They wanted to see her broken. When Claire Whitmore's fiancé humiliated her before London's elite, the vultures circled, hungry for her tears. She was supposed to crumble, beg, disappear into shame. Instead, she threw his ring at his feet and walked out like a queen. And there in the November night waited a duke's black carriage and a man who had loved her in silence, ready to show her what true devotion looked like. The Ashford ballroom glittered like a jewel box torn open, spilling light across polished marble floors. Claire Whitmore stood near the refreshment table, her silk gown the color of sea foam catching candlelight. Around her neck lay pearls her grandmother had worn, cool against skin that felt too warm despite November's chill. She looked to anyone watching like a woman who had won every prize worth having. Her fiancé, Thomas Hartley, stood 20 feet away, his hand resting on a young woman's shoulder. The stranger laughed at something he said, her fan fluttering. Thomas leaned closer, whispering words that made her blush. Claire sipped champagne, the bubbles sharp against her tongue. The pattern was familiar. Thomas would dance with her once, early, fulfilling bare obligation. Then he would drift toward younger women who did not yet know how little his attention meant. Lady Pemberton appeared at Claire's elbow, her smile tight with false sympathy. "You must be so proud, dear. Thomas is in such high demand this season." Claire met her gaze without flinching. "He certainly seems to enjoy being admired." The older woman's eyebrows lifted, surprised by the edge in Claire's tone. "Marriage will settle him, I'm sure." "Do they?" Claire murmured, watching Thomas's hand move to the stranger's back. The music swelled, a waltz making dancers spin across the floor. Claire remembered when she had believed in moments like these, when the glitter had seemed real, when Thomas's promises had sounded like truth. She set down her glass. Across the room, Thomas looked her way. Their eyes met briefly, and in his face she saw no guilt, only mild annoyance. He turned back to his companion, dismissing her. Something shifted inside her chest. Not heartbreak. That had come months ago. This was clearer. This was quiet certainty that tonight would not end as anyone expected. "Miss Whitmore, are you quite well?" Claire turned to find Mr. Edmund Griffith studying her with concern. "Perfectly well, thank you. You look rather pale. Perhaps some air—" "I am only tired of pretending, sir." The words escaped before she could stop them. Mr. Griffith glanced toward Thomas, understanding dawning. "No one would blame you if you chose to leave early." Claire smiled. Yes, exhausting is precisely the word. But she would not leave. Not tonight. Tonight she would stay until the end, because the end was coming whether she fled or faced it. Thomas abandoned his companion and headed toward Lord Ashford's study. Claire knew that confident stride. 3 other gentlemen followed him, their laughter echoing. She watched them disappear through a doorway, leaving her alone among hundreds. A server passed with champagne. Claire declined, needing clarity tonight. "Miss Whitmore." Caroline Ashford approached with genuine warmth. "You look beautiful tonight. That shade of green suits you, thank you. You are very kind." Caroline leaned closer, whispering, "My mother is blind if she thinks anyone believes Thomas Hartley deserves you." Claire felt unexpected tears prick her eyes. "Careful. Such talk could ruin my sterling reputation. Your reputation will survive anything. It is Thomas who should worry." Before Claire could respond, a commotion drew their attention. A latecomer had arrived. Claire's breath caught. Edward Hawthorne, Duke of Ashwick, stood in the doorway, removing his gloves with unhurried grace. He was taller than she remembered, his dark hair touched with silver at the temples, though he could not be more than 29. His evening clothes were impeccable but understated, his bearing that of a man who needed no ornament to command attention. He had not attended a London ball in 3 years. Caroline squeezed Claire's arm. "Well," she breathed, "this evening just became considerably more interesting." Claire could not look away. Edward's gaze swept the room with careful indifference until, for one suspended moment, it found hers. The noise of the ballroom faded. The glittering crowd seemed to blur at the edges. There was only that steady, measuring look, holding questions she was not ready to answer. Then Thomas emerged from the study, laughing too loudly at something one of his companions had said. He saw Claire watching him, and his smile faltered. But instead of coming to her side, instead of acknowledging his bride-to-be in any meaningful way, he turned deliberately toward another group of young women, his back to her. It was a small gesture, a casual cruelty, the kind that happened so often Claire had learned to absorb them in silence, but something in her refused to absorb this one. She straightened her shoulders, felt the weight of pearls against her collarbone, and made a decision that would unravel everything. "Caroline," she said softly, "would you mind terribly if I excused myself for a moment?" "Of course not. Are you unwell?" "No," Claire said, and meant it. "I believe I am finally quite well." She crossed the ballroom floor with measured steps, aware of eyes following her movement, aware of whispers beginning to ripple through the crowd like wind through wheat. She walked directly to where Thomas stood, his arm already draped around another woman's waist. He noticed her approach and sighed, his expression showing the faintest irritation. "Claire, my dear, are you requiring something?" His tone suggested she was an interruption, a nuisance. She smiled, calm and cold as winter moonlight. "Yes, Thomas. I require honesty. Something I believe we are both long overdue in providing." The woman under his arm shifted uncomfortably. The men nearby grew quiet, sensing sport or scandal. Thomas's jaw tightened. "Perhaps we might discuss this privately." "No," Claire said clearly. "I think we have hidden quite enough behind closed doors and pretty words." "Do you not agree?" His face flushed. "Claire, you are making a scene." "Am I?" She looked around at their growing audience, then back at him. "How unfortunate. I had hoped to handle this with grace, but it seems that quality is in short supply this evening." She pulled the engagement ring from her finger, the heavy sapphire that had always felt like a shackle rather than a promise, and held it up where candlelight made it flash blue fire. "I return this to you," she said, her voice steady and clear enough to carry, "with my sincere hope that you find someone who enjoys being ignored, humiliated, and treated as an inconvenience. I am certain there must be someone in London desperate enough for your family name to accept such treatment." Thomas stared at her, shock rendering him momentarily speechless. The woman beside him stepped hastily away. Around them, the whispers grew to a roar. "You cannot be serious," Thomas finally managed. "You would destroy your own reputation over a few harmless flirtations?" "Harmless," Claire repeated. "Yes, I imagine they felt harmless to you, but I am no longer interested in being harmed, harmlessly or otherwise." She placed the ring in his palm and closed his fingers around it. "I wish you every happiness," she said, "though I suspect you will find it as elusive as you found respect for the woman you claimed to love." Then she turned and walked away, her head high, her hands steady at her sides. Behind her, the ballroom erupted into chaos, gasps and exclamations, and the delicious thrill of scandal unfolding in real time. Claire did not look back, did not pause to collect her cloak or make polite farewells. She walked through the crowd like Moses through the Red Sea, people parting before her, and headed directly for the entrance. The cold November air hit her like a baptism when she stepped outside. And in the darkness beyond the torchlight, waiting with patient inevitability, stood a black carriage she had not expected to see again. The murmur of conversation washed over Claire like distant thunder. Through the terrace doors she could see her reflection, a woman in seafoam silk who looked composed, elegant, untouchable. But inside, something was cracking open, like a seed buried too long finally splitting toward light. Thomas reappeared from the card-room, brandy in hand, his cravat loosened. When he reached her side, he did not touch her, did not meet her eyes. He simply stood there, close enough to maintain appearances, distant enough to show his true feelings. "You are very quiet tonight," he said. "Am I?" It was not a question. Claire watched a couple waltz past, their faces soft with affection. She tried to remember if Thomas had ever looked at her that way. "I have been thinking," Thomas continued, "about our arrangement. Our engagement, you mean?" He waved a hand dismissively. "Yes. I believe we should discuss expectations before we proceed." Claire turned to face him fully. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. There was rouge on his collar that had not been there earlier. She felt nothing, No anger, no pain, just vast, clarifying emptiness. "By all means," she said. "Discuss." Thomas glanced around, lowering his voice. "I am a man, Claire. Society understands that men have certain needs. Once we are married, I expect you to be discreet about your awareness of such things. Discreet. Yes, my mother was always good about turning a blind eye to my father's interests. I trust you will show similar grace." The words landed like stones. This was not a revelation. She had known what she was agreeing to. Her aunt had assured her that all marriages involved such compromises. But standing here now, watching him outline the terms of her humiliation as if negotiating business, Claire felt something shift. And what freedoms might I expect in return? Thomas laughed. "You are a woman, Claire. Your freedom is maintaining our reputation, bearing my children, managing the household." Her voice was so soft he barely heard it. He was already looking away, his attention caught by a woman in yellow. "I must speak with Lord Crawford. Do try not to look so serious." He walked away without waiting. Claire stood very still. Around her the ball continued, laughter and music and champagne glasses. None of it touched her. She existed in perfect, crystalline clarity. She had spent months trying to convince herself this was acceptable, that she could adapt, compromise. She had been wrong. "Miss Whitmore." Caroline appeared, her face troubled. "I saw him speaking with you. Are you well?" Claire smiled. "I am better than I have been in quite some time." Before Caroline could respond, Claire moved toward the center of the ballroom, where Thomas stood with gentlemen already forgetting she existed. The crowd parted. Perhaps they sensed something in her bearing. "Thomas," she said clearly. He turned, surprised. "Yes, I need to speak with you. Now. Here. This is hardly the time. You wish to discuss our arrangement. I have decided to respond." A hush spread outward. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. "Claire, lower your voice." "No." She pulled the sapphire ring from her finger. "I think we have hidden enough behind privacy. Do you not agree? What are you doing?" "Giving you exactly what you want. Freedom." She held up the ring where candlelight caught it. The silence was complete. Even the musicians stopped. "You have made it clear that you view our engagement as a burden. I am returning this ring to relieve you of that burden." Thomas stared, his mouth opening. "Have you lost your senses?" "On the contrary, I believe I have finally found them." She placed the ring in his damp palm. "I wish you every happiness in your future endeavors. Though I suspect happiness, like respect, must be earned through how we treat those who trust us." A murmur rippled through the watching crowd. Claire heard her name whispered, heard the sharp intake of breath from matrons who would tomorrow tear her apart in their parlors. She did not care. Thomas's face had gone from red to white. "You will regret this." "Perhaps. But I would regret marrying you far more." She turned to face the assembled crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for disrupting your evening. Please continue your celebration. I am simply correcting a mistake before it became permanent." Then she walked. Not quickly, not fleeing. She walked with her shoulders back and her chin high. The crowd parted before her like a curtain drawing back. She heard Thomas call her name once, heard the desperate edge in it. He had not expected this, had not believed she would ever choose scandal over security. Neither had she until tonight. Caroline caught up with her near the entrance. "Claire, wait. I cannot stay. But thank you for being kind to me. Where will you go? Home? Or perhaps somewhere else entirely?" "I have not decided yet." She accepted her cloak from a footman who looked at her with something like admiration. Outside, the November air was sharp and clean, carrying the scent of coal smoke and distant rain. The street was empty, save for waiting carriages. Gas lamps cast pools of amber light onto wet cobblestones. Claire walked down the steps slowly, feeling the cold seep through her thin slippers. She had done it. Had actually done it. The enormity of what she had just sacrificed began to settle over her. Her reputation was shattered. Her prospects were gone. Her aunt would likely disown her. She had no plan, no protection, nowhere to go except back to an empty house and an uncertain future. But she was free. The sound of carriage wheels on cobblestones made her look up. A black carriage was rolling to a stop directly in front of her, its lacquer gleaming in the lamplight. The horses were matched greys, their breath steaming in the cold air. The carriage door opened, and Edward Hawthorne, Duke of Ashwick, stepped down into the lamplight. He was taller than she remembered, his dark coat impeccably tailored, his face shadowed beneath his hat. He did not smile, did not rush forward. He simply stood there, looking at her with eyes that held questions and answers in equal measure. "Miss Whitmore," he said quietly, "it seems you are in need of transportation." Claire's breath caught. She had not seen him in 3 years, had convinced herself she had made the right choice in refusing his courtship, had buried the memory of his patient kindness, his steady presence, his refusal to play games that men like Thomas treated as sport. "Your Grace," she managed, "I did not expect, I know." His voice was low, meant only for her ears, but I hoped, that you would eventually see yourself as clearly as I have always seen you. The street was silent except for the restless movement of the horses. Claire felt tears prick her eyes for the first time that evening, not tears of sadness, but of something she could not quite name. "I have just ruined myself," she said. "No." Edward took one step closer. "You have just freed yourself. There is a considerable difference. Society will not see it that way. Society has never been known for its wisdom, only its consistency and cruelty." He extended his hand toward her, not demanding, not presuming, simply offering. "I can take you home," he said, "or I can take you somewhere else, somewhere you can breathe, think, decide what you truly want without the weight of expectation. The choice, Miss Whitmore, is entirely yours." Claire looked at his hand, then at his face. In his eyes she saw no pity, no triumph at her downfall, only steady, patient regard. The same look he had given her 3 years ago when she had told him she was choosing Thomas instead. He had not argued then, had simply bowed and walked away. But he had not forgotten her, and she, God help her, had never truly forgotten him. She placed her hand in his fingers closed around hers, warm and certain. "Take me somewhere I can breathe," she said. Edward's expression shifted just barely, something like relief, like hope, carefully contained. He handed her up into the carriage, his touch gentle but firm. The interior was warm, lined with dark velvet. She sank onto the bench seat as he climbed in across from her and rapped twice on the ceiling. The carriage lurched forward, carrying her away from the Ashford ballroom, away from the wreckage of her old life, away from everything she had thought she needed to survive, and towards something she had not yet found the courage to name. The carriage rolled through London's dark streets, the rhythmic clatter of hooves against cobblestones filling the silence between them. Claire sat across from Edward, acutely aware of every breath, every shift of his posture, in the dim light filtering through the windows. She had forgotten how his presence could fill a space without demanding attention, how his silence felt like patience rather than judgment. The city passed by outside, gas lamps creating pools of amber light, late-night revelers stumbling from taverns, the occasional watchman calling the hour. Claire watched it all through the window, unable yet to meet Edward's eyes directly. "You are very kind to offer me transport," she finally said, her voice sounding strange in her own ears. "After everything." "After everything," Edward repeated quietly. "Do you mean after you refused my courtship 3 years ago, or after you just publicly severed your engagement to another man?" Claire's hands tightened in her lap. "Both, I suppose. I assure you, Miss Whitmore, my memory is quite intact, as is my ability to recognize when someone needs help without conditions attached." She looked at him then. Really looked. The years had refined him somehow, added depth to features she had once dismissed as too serious, too reserved. His dark eyes held no reproach, no triumph, only steady regard. "Why were you at that ball tonight?" she asked. "You have not attended such events in years." "No, I have not." He did not elaborate. Claire felt frustration rise in her chest, followed immediately by a wave of exhaustion. She had no right to demand explanations, no right to anything from this man. The carriage turned onto a quieter street, and suddenly Claire was transported back 3 years. To another carriage ride, Another November evening, another moment when Edward Hawthorne had looked at her with quiet intensity and asked her to consider a future she was not ready to imagine. She had been 20 then, fresh from a year of mourning her father, uncertain and afraid of so many things. Edward had been patient, careful, deliberate in his courtship. He had sent books instead of flowers, written letters that asked about her thoughts rather than praised her beauty, invited her to conversations that challenged rather than flattered. It had terrified her. Thomas, in contrast, had been easy, charming in the thoughtless way of men who never questioned their own worth. He had made her laugh, made her feel light, made promises that required nothing of her but compliance. She had chosen safety over substance, comfort over connection, and Edward had accepted her refusal with devastating grace. "I remember the last time we spoke," Claire said softly. "Before tonight." Edward's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Do you? You asked me if I was certain, if I truly believed Thomas Hartley would honor the promises he made. And you told me that love was built on trust, and you had chosen to trust him." Claire's throat constricted. "I was very young. You were 20, old enough to know your own heart. Clearly not." The words came out sharper than she intended. Edward's expression softened. "We are all entitled to mistakes, Miss Whitmore, even ones that take 3 years to correct." The carriage swayed around a corner. Claire steadied herself against the seat, grateful for the momentary distraction. "You did not argue with me," she said. "When I refused you, you simply bowed and wished me happiness. What would you have had me do? Beg? Demand? Tell you that you were making a terrible choice? Perhaps. At least then I would have known you cared enough to fight." Edward leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees, closing the distance between them without touching. When he spoke, his voice was low and intense. "I cared enough to respect your decision. To believe that you knew your own mind, even if I disagreed with your conclusion. I cared enough to walk away rather than pressure you into something you clearly did not want." "I did want it," Claire whispered. "I was simply too afraid to admit it." "Afraid of what?" "Of how much you saw, how deeply you looked. Thomas never asked me difficult questions, never challenged me to think beyond what was comfortable. You made me feel exposed, and exposure felt like danger." "Yes." Edward sat back, his face falling into shadow. "I cannot fault you for that. Vulnerability requires courage, and courage cannot be forced." They rode in silence for several minutes. Claire felt tears threatening again and blinked them away fiercely. She would not cry, not now. Not when she had finally found the strength to choose honesty over appearances. "Where are we going?" she asked. "My townhouse is too close to the scandal we just created. I am taking you to my estate in Hampshire." "Ashwick Manor. It is quiet there, private. You will have time to think without the entire city watching your every move. That is very far. It is 2 hours by carriage, less if the roads are clear." Claire should have protested, should have insisted on going to her aunt's house, on facing the consequences of her actions immediately. But the thought of her aunt's horrified face, the lectures and recriminations, the desperate attempts to salvage what could not be saved, she could not bear it. "Not tonight." "Will there be a chaperone?" she asked, though the question felt absurd given the circumstances. "My housekeeper, Mrs. Pemberton. She has been with my family for 30 years and is more formidable than any chaperone society could provide." "You will be entirely safe, Miss Whitmore. I give you my word." "Your word has always been reliable," Claire said quietly. "Unlike my judgment, do not be so hard on yourself. You chose what seemed right at the time. I chose comfort over truth. And now you have chosen truth over comfort. That is growth, not failure." Claire looked at him, this man she had rejected, this duke who had every reason to gloat or demand or expect something in return for his rescue. Instead, he sat across from her in the dimness, offering sanctuary without strings. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Truly." Edward was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made her chest tighten. "Because 3 years ago, I watched you choose someone who did not deserve you. And tonight I watched you finally choose yourself. That deserves support, not judgment. And if society says you have ruined me by taking me away unchaperoned, then society will say what it always says when women dare to make choices. But you will be safe while they say it. You will have space to breathe, to decide what you want next, without pressure or panic. The carriage began to climb, leaving London behind. Through the window, Claire could see the city lights growing distant, stars becoming visible in the clearing sky. "I do not deserve your kindness," she said. "Kindness is not something to be deserved, Miss Whitmore. It is simply something to be given." She thought about Thomas, about the calculations behind every gesture, every word, about how love had always felt like a transaction, something to be earned through perfect behavior and constant accommodation. Edward's kindness felt different, felt like something offered freely, with no ledger kept, no debts accrued. It was terrifying, and it was exactly what she needed. "May I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. Why did you come to that ball tonight? After 3 years of avoiding such events, why tonight?" Edward's smile was barely visible in the darkness, "Because Caroline Ashford sent me a note this afternoon. She said you looked like someone trapped in a cage, and that if I had ever meant what I said about caring for your well-being, I might want to attend her mother's ball." Caroline knew. Caroline is more observant than most people credit, and she cares about you. Claire felt something shift in her chest. Not love, not yet, but recognition, gratitude, the first stirrings of hope that perhaps she had not destroyed everything by walking away from Thomas. Perhaps instead, she had finally started building something real. The carriage rolled on through the night, carrying her away from the ruins of her old life and toward a future she could not yet imagine. But for the first time in 3 years, Claire was not afraid of the unknown. She was curious, and across from her Edward Hawthorne watched her face soften in the darkness and allowed himself to hope that this time she might choose differently, that this time she might choose him. The carriage rolled through iron gates as dawn broke across Hampshire countryside. Claire had dozed fitfully, waking occasionally to find Edward watching her with steady, patient eyes. Ashwick Manor rose before them through morning mist. Unlike London's imposing estates, this stone house nestled among ancient oaks felt graceful rather than grand. Ivy climbed the walls, smoke rose from chimneys, windows caught early light. It looked like a home, not a monument. "You are awake," Edward said softly. "Yes, I apologize for being poor company. You have had an exhausting evening. Sleep was sensible." The carriage stopped. A footman opened the door. Edward descended first, then offered his hand. Claire hesitated. This was the moment. Once she stepped down, once she entered his home, there would be no pretending. This was a choice, a declaration. She placed her hand in his. The morning air smelled of earth and grass and wood smoke. Claire breathed deeply, feeling something tight in her chest loosen. "Welcome to Ashwick Manor," Edward said. The front door opened. Mrs. Pemberton appeared, perhaps 60, steel-grey hair, eyes that missed nothing. "Your Grace," she said, "I was not expecting guests, an unexpected situation. This is Miss Claire Whitmore. She requires a room, a hot bath, and complete privacy." Mrs. Pemberton nodded. "The East Wing guest suite. Come, miss." Edward released Claire's elbow. "Rest. We can discuss everything later. You have already thanked me 3 times. Once is sufficient, then I will thank you no more." His slight smile suggested he did not mind. Claire followed Mrs. Pemberton inside. Unlike Thomas's formal home, this house felt lived in. Books sat on tables. A chess game remained half-finished. Fresh flowers filled vases. Someone loved this house. Mrs. Pemberton led her upstairs past portraits, where Claire recognized Edward's features. The Duke's father, Mrs. Pemberton said, "A good man. Died when his Grace was 19. That must have been difficult. He rose to it admirably, as he rises to everything." She opened doors to reveal a suite in soft blues and creams. Tall windows overlooked gardens. Fire crackled in the grate. "I will have water brought for a bath, and I will find you something to wear." Claire's throat tightened. "That is very kind. His Grace is a good man, miss. One of the best. Whatever trouble brought you here, you are safe under this roof. I believe that. Mrs. Pemberton left. Alone finally, Claire sank onto the bed. She had destroyed her reputation, fled London with a man to whom she was not promised. Society would tear her apart. And yet she felt lighter than she had in years. Servants brought a copper tub and steaming water. When they left, Claire stripped off her seafoam gown and sank into the heat with a deep sigh. The water unknotted her rigid shoulders. She thought about Edward's careful hands, the respect in his eyes, how he saw her, really saw her. A dress appeared on the bed, pale grey, modest. There was a note. Rest first. No rush. Claire dried herself, pulled on the dress, and fell into bed. The pillows smelled of cedar, of Edward. She woke to knocking. Sunlight streamed through windows. Miss Whitmore. Past noon. His Grace thought you might like tea. Claire sat up, disoriented. She had slept for hours. A maid entered with a tray, tea, bread, cheese, fruit. His Grace is in the library if you wish to join him, or rest more if you prefer. I will join him. Claire ate slowly, then checked her reflection. Pale but rested, hair loose without pins. This would have to do. She found the library easily. Edward stood by the window, book in hand, backlit by afternoon sun. He had changed into simpler clothes, no formal coat, shirt open at the collar, hair slightly dishevelled. He looked more at ease here than she had ever seen him in London. Miss Whitmore, I trust you rested well, better than I have in months. Your home is very peaceful. Claire moved to the bookshelves. Her fingers trailed across spines. Philosophy, poetry, science. Personal books, chosen for interest rather than display. I should clarify what I intend to do next, she said. Edward leaned against his desk. What do you intend? I will write to my aunt today. Face whatever consequences arise. I will not hide from my choices. Admirable. And then I suppose I will find somewhere to live. My father left me a small income, perhaps a cottage by the sea. You could stay here. The words hung between them. Your Grace, Edward. What? My name is Edward. I would prefer you use it. That would be inappropriate. We are past appropriate, Miss Whitmore. You spent the night under my roof unchaperoned. He had a point. Claire felt a laugh bubble up. This is absurd, she said. All of it. Is it? Edward moved closer. You chose honesty over pretense, freedom over security. That is not absurd. That is brave. I do not feel brave. I feel terrified. Bravery is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite it. He was close now. Close enough that she could see amber flecks in his dark eyes, smell cedar on his skin. Why are you doing this? She asked. What do you want from me? Edward's expression was completely open. I want you to have time and space to discover what you want, without pressure, without expectations. And when you know, truly know, then you can decide. Decide what? Whether you want to leave or whether you want to stay. His hand reached up slowly, giving her time to step back. When she did not move, his fingers tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the touch achingly gentle. The choice, he said quietly, is entirely yours. It always has been. Claire's breath caught. This close, she could feel warmth radiating from him, see the pulse at his throat, recognize the desire in his eyes, matched by the rigid control he maintained. He wanted her, but he would not push, would not demand, would wait for her to choose. It was more seductive than any aggressive pursuit could have been. I do not know what I want, she whispered. Then stay until you do. His hand dropped away, leaving her skin tingling. And Claire, standing in a sunlit library far from everything she had known, realized that for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she needed to be. The days at Ashwick Manor developed a rhythm Claire had not known she craved. She woke to birdsong instead of carriage wheels, took breakfast in a sunlit room overlooking gardens, spent afternoons reading in the library while Edward attended to estate business. It was peaceful, terrifyingly peaceful. On the third morning, she found Edward in the stables inspecting a mare's foreleg. He wore plain riding clothes, his sleeves rolled to his elbows, hay clinging to his dark hair. He looked nothing like a duke, and everything like a man who belonged exactly where he was. "She has been favoring this leg," he said without looking up. "The groom thinks it is nothing, but I am not convinced." Claire approached cautiously. The mare was beautiful, dappled grey with intelligent eyes. "May I?" Edward stepped back, allowing her closer. Claire ran her hand down the mare's leg, feeling for heat or swelling. The horse shifted, but allowed the examination. "There," Claire said, finding a small stone wedged near the frog, just a pebble making her uncomfortable. She extracted it carefully. The mare snorted softly as if in thanks. "You know horses," Edward observed. "My father kept a small stable. I spent more time there than in the drawing room, much to my aunt's horror." "Your aunt sounds exhausting. She means well. She simply believes there is only one proper way for a woman to exist, and that way did not include removing stones from horses' hooves." Claire smiled. "No. It involved needlepoint and polite conversation, and never, ever having opinions about anything important." Edward's expression darkened. Thomas must have seemed perfect for that life. He did. Which should have told me everything I needed to know about how miserable I would have been. They walked back toward the house together, the morning sun warm on Claire's shoulders. A groom called out a greeting, and Edward responded with easy familiarity. No formality, no distance, just a man who knew his people and was known by them. "You run this estate yourself," Claire said. "No steward. I have a steward for the accounts and legal matters, but the land, the people, I prefer to know them directly. That is unusual, perhaps. But I find it difficult to care about things I do not understand, and I cannot understand from a distance." They reached the garden path. Claire paused by a rose that had somehow survived into November, its petals deep crimson against grey stone. "You are different here," she said, "than in London. London requires masks. Here, I can simply be myself." "And who is that?" Edward looked at her, really looked, and Claire felt that familiar flutter in her chest. A good man trying to do right by his responsibilities. Nothing more complicated than that. "I think," Claire said softly, "that you are far more complicated than you admit." His smile was slight but genuine. "Perhaps. But complexity does not require performance." They continued walking. Claire found herself telling him about her childhood, about her father's quiet kindness and her mother's early death, about feeling always slightly out of step with what was expected of her. Edward listened without interrupting, without offering platitudes or solutions. He simply listened, and it was more valuable than any advice could have been. That evening, they played chess in the library. Edward won the first game easily. "You are better than you pretended," Claire accused. "I merely allowed you to think you had a chance." She threw a cushion at him. He caught it, laughing, and the sound did something strange to her heart. The second game, she played ruthlessly. Edward's eyebrows rose as she trapped his queen. "I underestimated you," he admitted. "Most people do." Their fingers brushed as she moved a piece. Neither pulled away immediately. The touch lingered, deliberate now, acknowledged. Claire's breath caught. Edward's eyes darkened. "I should retire," she said, though she did not move. "Should you?" "It is late. It is barely 9. Still." She stood, and he stood with her. They were close now, closer than propriety allowed. She could see the pulse at his throat, the way his hands flexed as though restraining himself from reaching for her. "Claire," he said, and her name in his voice sounded like a prayer. "Yes, if you want me to keep my distance, you need only say so. But if you want—" He stopped, started again. "I am trying very hard to be honorable, to give you space, but you make it extraordinarily difficult." "Good," Claire whispered. His control wavered. She saw it in the way his jaw clenched, the way his breathing changed. "You should go upstairs," he said roughly, "before I forget that I am supposed to be a gentleman." "What if I do not want you to be a gentleman?" The words hung between them, dangerous and thrilling. Edward closed his eyes briefly. "Claire, you do not know what you are asking. I know exactly what I am asking. You have been through an ordeal. Your judgment may be—" "My judgment," she interrupted, "is clearer than it has ever been. I am not confused, Edward. I am not vulnerable. I am simply choosing what you." The word broke something in him. He stepped forward, his hand rising to cup her face with devastating gentleness. "Are you certain?" "Yes." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "If we do this, there is no going back. Society will know. Your reputation is already destroyed." Claire covered his hand with hers. "I do not care what society thinks. I care what I think, what I feel, and what do you feel?" "Like I have been half asleep for 3 years and am finally waking up." Edward's forehead touched hers, their breath mingling. "I have wanted you since the moment I met you," he confessed. "Every day of the past 3 years, I have wanted you. Then stop being noble and kiss me." He did. It was not gentle, not tentative. His mouth claimed hers with years of restrained desire finally unleashed. Claire gasped, opening to him, her hands fisting in his shirt as he pulled her closer. They were all heat and hunger. 3 years of longing compressed into desperate kisses and wandering hands. Edward's fingers tangled in her hair, Claire's tracing the muscles of his back through thin linen. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were nearly black with want. "Upstairs," he said roughly. "Now, before I take you right here in the library." Claire's pulse raced. She took his hand, and together they climbed the stairs to her room. Inside, Edward paused. "Last chance to change your mind. I will not change my mind." He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring. His hands found the buttons of her dress, unfastening them with careful reverence. Claire's fingers worked at his shirt, revealing warm skin and firm muscle. Clothes fell away. They moved to the bed, Edward laying her down gently before covering her body with his own. His weight was perfect, grounding, right. "Beautiful," he murmured against her throat. "You are so beautiful." Claire arched into his touch as his hands explored, learning her body with the same focused attention he gave everything. Every gasp she made, every shiver, he noticed and remembered. When they finally came together, it was with a tenderness that stole her breath. Edward moved slowly, his eyes never leaving hers, watching every expression that crossed her face. "I love you," he said, and the words were wrenched from somewhere deep. "I have always loved you." Claire felt tears slip from her eyes. "I love you too." They moved together, building towards something that felt like coming home. When release found them, they clung to each other, breathing the same air, hearts beating in synchrony. Afterward, Edward pulled her close, her back to his chest, his arm wrapped protectively around her waist. He pressed kisses to her shoulder, her neck, her hair. "Stay," he whispered. "Not just tonight. Stay." "Yes," Claire breathed. "Yes." Outside, November wind rattled the windows. But inside, wrapped in Edward's warmth, Claire had never felt safer, never felt more herself. She had chosen scandal over security, freedom over fear, love over comfort. And it was the best choice she had ever made. If you're enjoying this journey from scandal to true love, I would love to know. Please leave a comment telling me where in the world you are listening from. Are you discovering this story in New York, London, São Paulo, or somewhere completely unexpected? Your comments help me understand who is connecting with Claire and Edward's story, and I read every single one. It means more than you know. Morning light filtered through the curtains, painting everything in shades of gold and rose. Claire woke slowly, warm and languid, Edward's arm still wrapped around her waist. His breath was steady against her neck, his body curved protectively around hers. She had never woken like this, never felt this particular kind of peace. "You are awake," Edward murmured against her shoulder. "How did you know?" "Your breathing changed." He pressed a kiss to the curve of her neck, and Claire shivered despite the warmth. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. She turned in his arms to face him. His hair was disheveled, his jaw shadowed with morning stubble, his eyes vulnerable in a way she had never seen. "No," she said firmly. "Do you?" "God, no." His hand came up to cup her face. "I only regret the 3 years I wasted waiting. I needed those 3 years to understand what I actually wanted. And what do you want?" Claire traced the line of his jaw with her fingers. "This, you, a life built on truth instead of performance." Edward caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. "I need to tell you something. About that night at the ball." She waited, sensing the weight of what was coming. "I did not go by chance," he said. "Caroline wrote to me, yes. But I had been watching from a distance for months, waiting, hoping you would see what I saw, that Thomas Hartley was destroying you slowly. You were watching me, not in any untoward way, but I maintained certain friendships, asked certain questions. I needed to know you were safe, even if you were not mine." Claire's throat tightened. "Why?" "Because love does not end simply because it is not returned." His voice was raw. "I told myself I had moved on, that I had accepted your choice. But the truth is, I never stopped loving you, never stopped hoping." She kissed him then, pouring 3 years of regret and gratitude and new love into the gesture. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I was so afraid of you," she confessed, "of how much you saw, how deeply you looked. And now I am grateful. Because someone finally sees me, really sees me. Not what I should be, but what I am." Edward's eyes darkened. "And what are you, Claire?" "Yours," she whispered, "if you will have me." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and they lost themselves in each other until Mrs. Pemberton's discreet knock announced breakfast. They spent the day together, walking the estate grounds. Edward showed her the tenant farms, introduced her to families who had worked his land for generations. Children ran to greet him, and he knew all their names. "You are beloved here," Claire observed. "I am respected, perhaps. I try to be fair. It is more than that. They trust you. Trust must be earned. I learned that from my father." They paused by a stream, watching water tumble over smooth stones. Edward picked up a flat rock, skipped it across the surface. 4 skips before it sank. "Show me," Claire said. He positioned himself behind her, his arms coming around to guide her stance. His chest pressed against her back, his breath warm against her ear. "Angle your wrist like this. Release at the right moment." She threw. The stone skipped twice. "Better," he murmured, but he did not move away. Claire turned in his arms. They were alone here, hidden from the house by a copse of trees. The autumn sun was warm on her face, the sound of water musical. "Edward," she said, "what happens when we return to London?" His expression grew serious. "That depends on what you want. What are the options? We could say you stayed with distant relatives, that you needed time after breaking your engagement. Society might accept that, given time. And the truth is that you spent unchaperoned nights under my roof, that we have been intimate. Society will assume the worst regardless of what we say." Claire studied his face. "What do you want?" Edward's jaw tightened. "I want to marry you. I want to make you my duchess, stand before God and everyone and claim you as mine. But I will not trap you, will not force you into another cage, even a gilded one. You think marriage to you would be a cage. I think marriage is what we make it. With Thomas, it would have been a prison. With me, I hope it would be a partnership. But only if you choose it freely." Claire's heart pounded. "And if I do not choose it, if I want to be independent, live quietly somewhere on my own." Pain flashed in his eyes, but his voice remained steady. "Then I will help you establish yourself wherever you wish, give you the means to be comfortable, and I will let you go. You would do that. I would do anything that makes you happy, even if it costs me everything." She kissed him fiercely, suddenly, desperately. He responded immediately, his hands tangling in her hair, pulling her closer. When they broke apart, she was breathing hard. "I do not want independence from you," she said. "I want independence with you. A marriage where I am seen and heard, where my thoughts matter, where I can be myself without apology." "Yes," Edward said immediately. "God, yes. That is all I have ever wanted to offer you. Then ask me properly." He dropped to one knee right there by the stream, taking her hand in both of his. "Claire Whitmore, will you marry me? Not because society demands it, not because your reputation requires it, but because I love you beyond reason and cannot imagine my life without you in it." "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Edward, I will marry you." He stood, lifted her off her feet and spun her around. When he set her down, they were both laughing and crying at once. "I have nothing to give you," she said. "No dowry, no connections. My reputation is ruined. You have yourself. That is everything I need." They walked back to the house hand in hand. Mrs. Pemberton took one look at their faces and smiled. "Shall I prepare the rose bedroom for his grace, or will he be staying in the east wing tonight?" Claire blushed crimson. Edward laughed. "The east wing, Mrs. Pemberton, and perhaps we should discuss wedding arrangements." The housekeeper's stern face softened. "About time, Your Grace. About time." That evening they sat together in the library. Claire curled against Edward's side as he read aloud from a book of poetry. His voice was deep and soothing, his arms solid around her shoulders. She thought about Thomas, about the life she had almost resigned herself to, the careful distance, the polite indifference, the slow death of self that would have resulted. And she thought about this, warmth and words and being known. "Edward," she said softly, I need to say something." He set down the book, giving her his full attention. "I am sorry," she said, "for not seeing you 3 years ago, for choosing badly, for wasting time we could have had together." Edward tilted her chin up. "Look at me." She did. "You have nothing to apologize for. You were not ready then. Perhaps neither of us was. What matters is that we are here now, choosing each other with clear eyes and open hearts. But we lost 3 years, or we gained the wisdom to appreciate what we have." His thumb brushed her lower lip. "I would wait 3 more years if it meant having you like this, sure of yourself, sure of us." Claire kissed him slowly, thoroughly. When she pulled back, his eyes were dark with desire. "Bed," he said roughly. "Now." She laughed but allowed him to pull her to her feet. They climbed the stairs together, and at the top Edward swept her into his arms, carrying her the rest of the way to her room. Inside, he set her down gently, his hands immediately going to the fastenings of her dress. "I will never tire of this," he murmured against her throat, "of undressing you, of learning what makes you gasp, of watching you come apart in my arms." "Then do not stop," Claire whispered. "Never stop." They made love slowly this time, savoring every touch, every kiss. Edward mapped her body with reverent attention, and Claire discovered the pleasure of exploring him in return, the hard planes of his chest, the strength in his shoulders, the way he shuddered when she touched him just so. Afterward they lay tangled together, skin to skin, hearts still racing. "I love you," Edward said against her hair. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you." Claire traced patterns on his chest. "Thank you for waiting for me, for seeing me when I could not see myself. Always," he promised. Always. Outside, November stars wheeled across a clear sky. Inside, 2 people who had found each other across years, and mistakes and fear held tight, building a future from truth and trust and the courage to choose love. Not the easy love of convenience, but the hard, beautiful love of 2 people who had learned to see each other clearly and chose to stay anyway. A week had passed since Edward's proposal, a week of mornings waking in his arms, afternoons exploring the estate together, evenings by the fire discussing everything and nothing. Claire had written to her aunt, explaining her decision. The reply had been predictably furious, filled with words like disgrace and ruin and never darken my door again. Claire had read it once, folded it carefully, and placed it in the fire. She was building a new life now, one that required no permission. Tonight, rain drummed against the windows. Edward had been called to the village to help with a roof damaged by the storm, leaving Claire alone in the library. She tried to read, but her mind kept drifting to him. His hands, his voice, the way he looked at her as though she were something precious. The front door opened. She heard his voice thanking the servants, the sound of wet boots being removed. Then his footsteps approaching the library. He appeared in the doorway, hair damp from rain, shirt clinging to his shoulders. Their eyes met and something electric passed between them. "The family is safe," he said. "Roof is temporarily patched. They will need proper repairs tomorrow." "You are soaked." "I have been wetter." He moved into the room, and Claire set down her book. There was something different in his eyes tonight, something raw and unguarded. "Claire," he said quietly, "come here." It was not a command. It was a request, a plea. She went to him, and his arms came around her immediately, pulling her close despite his wet clothes. He smelled of rain and earth and something uniquely him. "I missed you," he murmured against her hair. "Even for just a few hours I missed you. I was right here. You are always here now, in my thoughts, in my blood. I cannot remember what it felt like before you." She tilted her face up, and he kissed her. Slowly at first, then with increasing urgency. His hands moved to her hair, pulling pins free until it tumbled down her back. "Edward," she breathed against his mouth, "tell me to stop. I do not want you to stop." His control snapped. He lifted her, carried her to the chair by the fire, and sat with her straddling his lap. Their mouths met again, desperate and hungry. Claire's fingers worked at his wet shirt, pushing it off his shoulders. "You are beautiful," he said, his hands spanning her waist. "So goddamn beautiful it hurts to look at you." "Then touch me instead." He did. His hands moved up her sides, over her ribs, finding the fastenings of her dress. Buttons came undone. Fabric parted. His mouth followed the path his hands made, pressing kisses to newly exposed skin. Claire arched into him, her head falling back as his lips traced her collarbone, the hollow of her throat, lower still. She felt his restraint warring with his desire, felt the tremor in his hands as he held himself in check. "Let go," she whispered. "Edward, I want all of you. No holding back." Something shifted in his expression. The careful control he always maintained fell away, leaving only raw need. "Here?" he asked roughly. "Now?" "Yes." He stood with her in his arms, crossed to the sofa, laid her down upon it. His body covered hers, heavy and perfect. They were still half-dressed, urgency overriding patience. His hand slid beneath her skirts, finding the softness of her thigh, moving higher. Claire gasped as his fingers found her warmth, stroking with maddening slowness. "You are ready for me," he said with satisfaction. "I am always ready for you." He groaned, unfastening his trousers with shaking hands. When he entered her, they both stilled, savoring the perfect joining. "Move," Claire demanded. "Please, Edward, move." He did. Deep, powerful strokes that made her cry out. The fire cast dancing shadows across them as they moved together, all pretense abandoned. This was not gentle lovemaking. This was passion unleashed, desire given free rein. Claire wrapped her legs around him, meeting each thrust. The friction built, pleasure spiraling higher. Edward's mouth claimed hers, swallowing her moans, his own breathing ragged. "I love you," he said against her lips. "God help me, I love you so much." "Show me," Claire gasped. "Show me." He shifted the angle, hitting a spot inside her that made her see stars. His thumb found the sensitive bundle of nerves between her legs, circling with expert precision. Claire shattered. The climax rolled through her in waves, stealing her breath, making her arch and shake beneath him. Edward followed moments later, his release drawn from him by her pulsing warmth, his face buried in her neck as he groaned her name. They lay tangled together afterward, hearts pounding, skins slick with perspiration. The fire crackled. Rain continued its steady rhythm against glass. Edward pressed kisses to her shoulder, her neck, her jaw. His hand traced lazy patterns on her bare hip. "I did not hurt you," he asked quietly. "No, that was..." "Perfect," he finished. "You are perfect." They remained there for long minutes, neither willing to break the connection. Finally, Edward shifted, withdrawing carefully and adjusting their clothing with tender attention. "We should go upstairs," he said. "Be comfortable." Claire nodded, but when he moved to rise, she caught his hand. "Wait." He looked down at her, questioning. "I need you to know something," she said. "This, what we have, it is not just desire, not just physical. I know that, but do you?" She sat up, cupping his face in her hands. "Because I need you to understand that I choose you, every day in every way. Not because you rescued me, not because society demands it, but because you are the only man I have ever truly wanted." Edward's eyes glistened. His throat worked as he swallowed hard. "I spent 3 years," he said roughly, "convincing myself I could live without you, that I could be content with my duties and my land and my books. And then you walked back into my life, and I realized I had been merely existing. You make me live, Claire. You make everything matter." She kissed him softly. "Then let us live together. Fully. Honestly. With nothing held back." "Nothing held back," he agreed. They rose together, gathering discarded clothing. Edward wrapped her in his jacket against the chill, then swept her into his arms again. "I can walk," she protested. "I know, but I want to carry you." He took her upstairs to his own chamber this time, laying her in his bed with careful reverence. They undressed each other slowly now, taking time to explore, to memorize. Edward kissed every inch of her as though learning scripture, the inside of her wrist, the curve of her waist, the sensitive skin behind her knee. Claire reciprocated, discovering that he shivered when she kissed his throat, that his breath caught when her nails dragged lightly down his back. When they joined again, it was different, slower, deeper, eyes locked, breathing synchronized, moving as one. This was intimacy beyond the physical. This was two souls recognizing their match. Release came gently this time, rolling through them like a tide, rather than crashing like a wave. They held each other through it, murmuring words of love and promise. Afterward, Edward pulled her close, arranging her body against his with possessive tenderness. He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Sleep," he murmured. "I have you." Claire nestled deeper into his embrace, utterly safe, utterly content. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, wrapped in Edward's warmth, she had found home. She thought of the woman she had been, afraid of depth, choosing surface over substance, settling for less than she deserved. That woman was gone. In her place was someone braver, someone who had learned that true love was not about safety, but about being seen and choosing to stay visible, about vulnerability and trust and the terrifying beauty of being fully known. Edward's breathing deepened as sleep claimed him, but his arms remained tight around her, even in unconsciousness, refusing to let her go. Claire smiled in the darkness. She had chosen scandal over security, freedom over fear, love over comfort, and in return, she had found something she had never dared to hope for. She had found herself, and she had found him. Tomorrow they would begin planning their return to London, their wedding, their future. But tonight there was only this: two people who had traveled separate paths finally finding their way home to each other. It was enough. It was everything. Morning light streamed through unfamiliar windows. Claire woke slowly, luxuriously, wrapped in sheets that smelled of Edward and cedar. She was in his bed, in his chamber, where she had every right to be. The thought made her smile. Edward was already awake, propped on one elbow, watching her. His hair was disheveled, his jaw shadowed with stubble, his eyes soft with affection. "Good morning," he said quietly. "How long have you been awake?" "Long enough to realize I could spend every morning like this and never grow tired of it." Claire stretched, the sheet slipping lower. Edward's gaze darkened, but he made no move toward her. "You are very restrained this morning," she observed. "I am trying to let you wake properly before I ravish you again." She laughed, reaching for him. "Then you are wasting valuable time." He kissed her thoroughly, his hand sliding beneath the sheets to cup her hip. But before things could progress, he pulled back. "We need to talk," he said. Claire's heart stuttered. Those words, in her experience, never preceded good news. Edward must have seen her expression because he immediately cupped her face. "Not about us. Never doubt us. But about what comes next." She relaxed slightly. "All right." He sat up, pulling her with him so they faced each other cross-legged on the bed, sheets pooled around their waists. The intimacy of it, having serious conversation while half-dressed in rumpled bedding, felt more real than any formal discussion ever could. "I want to be very clear about something," Edward said. "I asked you to marry me because I love you, not because society demands it, not because we have been intimate, not because I feel obligated to protect your reputation. I know that. Do you?" His eyes searched hers. "Because I need you to understand that you owe me nothing. If you have doubts, if you want more time, if you would rather establish yourself independently before committing to marriage, I will support any choice you make." Claire's throat tightened. "Why are you saying this now?" Because last night was intense, passionate, and I do not want you to feel trapped by it. Do not want you to think that physical intimacy obligates you to anything." She took his hands in hers. "Edward, look at me." He did. "I am not trapped," she said firmly. "I am not confused. I am not making decisions based on passion or obligation or fear of scandal. I am making them based on what I want. And what I want is you, a life with you, a partnership built on honesty and respect and, yes, also desire. But desire as part of something larger, not as the foundation of it." His shoulders relaxed. "You are certain?" "Completely." She leaned forward, kissing him softly. "You have given me the space to choose freely. Now trust that I am choosing well. I do trust you." He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "I simply needed to be sure you knew you had options, that I am not asking you to sacrifice anything." "The only thing I would sacrifice," Claire said, "is the future I thought I wanted, the safe, comfortable, utterly soul-destroying future. And that is not sacrifice, that is escape." Edward's smile was brilliant. "Then let us plan our escape properly." They dressed and went downstairs for breakfast. Mrs. Pemberton served them with barely concealed satisfaction, having clearly noticed that Claire's belongings had migrated to the Duke's chamber. "Will you be requiring separate rooms prepared for the return to London, Your Grace?" she asked innocently. Edward glanced at Claire, who blushed but met his eyes steadily. "No, Mrs. Pemberton. We will require one suite. We are to be married as soon as it can be arranged." The housekeeper's stern face broke into a genuine smile. "About time," she muttered. "I will begin preparations immediately." After breakfast, they sat together in Edward's study, discussing practicalities. The return to London, the inevitable scandal, the wedding arrangements. "We could marry quietly here," Edward suggested. "Then present London with a fait accompli. Give them no opportunity to interfere or object." Claire considered. "It would certainly be simpler, but it also feels like hiding. You want a London wedding, I want to face society together. Show them that I made a choice and stand by it proudly. If we marry in secret, it suggests shame. I refuse to be ashamed of choosing you." Edward's expression was fierce with pride. "Then we will return to London, face whatever comes, and marry in front of God and everyone who matters. My aunt will be horrified. Your aunt has already disowned you. Her opinion is irrelevant." "Fair point." Claire traced patterns on the desk between them. "What about your family, your connections? Will they object to you marrying a woman with a ruined reputation?" Edward's laugh was sharp. "My mother's family disowned her for marrying my father. He was a second son with no prospects. She chose love over status and never regretted it. If they object to you, they are hypocrites of the highest order." "Did she really?" "She did. And my father spent every day of their marriage proving she made the right choice. He built this estate from near bankruptcy to prosperity, became a duke through merit and determination. All because a woman believed in him when no one else did." Claire felt tears prick her eyes. "No wonder you value choice so highly. My parents taught me that true partnership is built on mutual respect and freely given devotion. Anything less is simply a business arrangement dressed in wedding clothes." He came around the desk, pulled her to her feet and into his arms. "I will not lie and say London will be easy," he said quietly. "Thomas will spread stories. Your aunt will publicly denounce you. Society will be cruel. I know, but I will be beside you through all of it. And eventually they will see what I see, a woman of courage and integrity who refused to settle for less than she deserved." Claire buried her face in his chest. "I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes." "Good." His arms tightened around her. "Love should be a little terrifying. It means it matters." They spent the afternoon writing letters to Edward's solicitor about marriage arrangements, to his London household about preparations for their arrival, to select friends who could be trusted to support them. Claire wrote to Caroline Ashford, thanking her for the note that had brought Edward to the ball, for her friendship during difficult times. The response came back within days, delivered by express messenger. "Dearest Claire, I am delighted. Thomas has been telling anyone who will listen that you begged him to take you back, and he nobly refused. No one believes him. Half of London knows he is a fool, and the other half is simply waiting for confirmation. Your marriage to the Duke will provide it beautifully. Come home and hold your head high. You have more friends than you know. Yours in solidarity, Caroline." Claire showed the letter to Edward, who smiled grimly. "See, you are not alone in this. I have you. That is enough. You also have Caroline, and you will find others. Good people who recognize courage when they see it." That evening they walked through the gardens one last time before their departure. Winter was settling in properly now, the last roses finished, trees bare against a grey sky. "I will miss this place," Claire said. "It has been a refuge. We will return often." Edward tucked her hand into the crook of his arm. "But we cannot hide here forever. We have a life to build, a scandal to face, a future to claim." She leaned against him. "I am ready. I know you are." His kiss was soft against her temple. "You are the bravest person I have ever known." "I am not brave. I am simply tired of being afraid." "Bravery is not the absence of fear. It is choosing to act despite it. You have proven that every day since you walked out of that ballroom." They stood together in the fading light, two people who had found each other across years and mistakes and fear. Tomorrow they would return to London, would face judgment and gossip and cruelty, but tonight they had each other, and that was all the courage they needed. Inside, Mrs. Pemberton supervised the packing of their belongings. The staff moved with quiet efficiency, preparing for the return to town. Claire watched from the window as Edward spoke with his steward about managing the estate in his absence. He gestured animatedly, clearly passionate about some detail of crop rotation or tenant welfare. This was the man she was choosing, not a title or a fortune or social position, but this, a man who cared deeply about his responsibilities, who treated everyone with respect, who saw her as an equal partner. She had been so afraid of being truly seen, had believed that hiding parts of herself was necessary for survival. But Edward had looked past every defense, every performance, every carefully constructed facade, and he had loved what he found. More than that, he had helped her love it too. The door opened. Edward entered, crossing to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. "Ready for tomorrow?" he asked. Claire covered his hands with hers, leaning back against his solid warmth. "With you," she said. "Yes, I am ready for anything." The carriage rolled through London streets as winter afternoon light painted everything in shades of gold and grey. Claire sat beside Edward, their hands intertwined, watching the familiar buildings pass with entirely new eyes. She had left this city expecting never to return. Now she was coming back as a duke's intended bride, ready to face whatever judgment awaited. "Are you nervous?" Edward asked quietly. Surprisingly, no. Claire squeezed his hand, terrified perhaps, but not nervous. There is a difference. Nervousness suggests doubt. Terror is simply acknowledging reality. Society will be vicious. They will try to be. His thumb traced circles on her palm, but we will not give them the satisfaction of shame. The carriage turned onto a fashionable street, and Claire recognized where they were heading. "Your townhouse." "Our townhouse." Edward's smile was slight but warm. "Everything I have is yours now. You need to start thinking of it that way." The house was elegant. Tall windows, well-maintained facade, discreet but unmistakably wealthy. Servants appeared immediately as they arrived, bowing to Edward and casting curious glances at Claire. "This is Miss Claire Whitmore," Edward said clearly. "My betrothed. You will accord her every courtesy due to the future Duchess of Ashwick." The head butler, an older man with kind eyes, bowed deeply. "Welcome, Miss Whitmore. We are honored to receive you." Claire felt tears threaten at the simple acceptance. "Thank you." Inside, the townhouse was beautiful in the same understated way as Ashwick Manor, comfortable rather than ostentatious, lived in rather than displayed. Edward showed her through the main rooms, then led her upstairs to a suite that took her breath away. The bedroom was done in soft greys and blues, with a sitting room attached and windows overlooking a private garden. "This was my mother's suite," Edward said. "I had it prepared for you." "Edward, it is beautiful." He came to stand behind her at the window, his arms wrapping around her waist. "I want you to be comfortable here, happy. This is your home now." She leaned back against him. "When will we face them?" "Society. Tonight, if you are willing. There is a musical at the Pemberton House. Half of London will be there, including, almost certainly, Thomas Hartley. Claire's spine straightened. Then we should attend. You are certain. I told you I will not hide. Let them see me, let them see us together. Let them make their judgments. I am done caring what people think when they do not truly know me. Edward turned her in his arms, his eyes fierce with pride. I love you. I know. She smiled. I count on it. They dressed carefully for the evening. Claire wore a gown Edward had commissioned, deep emerald silk that brought out her eyes, cut elegantly but not provocatively. Her hair was styled simply, a few jeweled pins the only adornment. Edward wore formal black, his cravat tied precisely, his bearing every inch the Duke. But when he looked at Claire, all the formality melted into warmth. Ready, he asked, offering his arm. She took it. Ready. The Pemberton musical was in full swing when they arrived. The major domo announced them clearly. The Duke of Ashwick and Miss Claire Whitmore. Conversation stopped. Every head turned. Claire felt the weight of hundreds of eyes assessing, judging, already forming opinions. She lifted her chin and walked into the room at Edward's side. The silence lasted perhaps 5 seconds. Then whispers erupted like a physical wave. Claire saw familiar faces, women who had been kind to her, women who had envied her, men who had courted her before her engagement to Thomas. And there, near the refreshment table, Thomas himself, his face draining of color as he saw her. Edward, she murmured. I see him. Do you want to leave? No, I want to stay. Then we stay. Caroline Ashford appeared beside them immediately, her smile brilliant. Claire, Your Grace, how wonderful to see you both. Claire, that gown is absolutely stunning. You must tell me where you found it. The Duke commissioned it, Claire said clearly. He has excellent taste. In all things, Caroline agreed, her eyes twinkling. Come, there are people you should greet. She steered them through the crowd with practiced ease, stopping to make introductions, providing casual explanations that made their presence seem perfectly natural. Other friends joined them, young women who had always liked Claire, gentlemen who respected Edward. Slowly the tension in the room shifted. Not everyone was accepting, but enough people were that the atmosphere became bearable. Then Thomas approached. Claire, he said, his voice tight. Your Grace, how unexpected to see you here. Is it? Edward said mildly. I attend the Pemberton musicals regularly, but with my betrothed, yes. Edward's tone could have frozen fire. Is there something you wish to say, Hartley? Thomas's eyes darted between them. I simply think it is rather quick. After breaking our engagement, Claire has become engaged to you in a matter of weeks. Some might find that suspicious. Some might find it none of their concern, Edward replied pleasantly. But since you have raised the issue, perhaps we should clarify matters. You attempted to end your engagement to Miss Whitmore. She beat you to it by making the break decisively and publicly. I had the good fortune to be in a position to offer her support. We renewed an acquaintance from years past, and we discovered what we both should have known then, that we are remarkably well suited. That is a very convenient story. It is the truth. Edward's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. If you have heard differently, I suggest you consider the reliability of your sources. Gossip, I have found, is rarely accurate. Thomas's face flushed. You cannot seriously intend to marry her. Her reputation is destroyed, on the contrary. Edward's arm tightened around Claire's waist. I find her reputation as a woman of courage and integrity to be entirely intact. She refused to accept a loveless marriage. She chose honesty over convenience. Those are qualities I admire greatly. You are being naive. I am being deliberate. Edward's eyes were hard now. And I grow weary of this conversation, if you will excuse us. He guided Claire away before Thomas could respond. She was shaking, but not with fear, with exhilaration. You demolished him, she whispered. He deserved no less. They moved through the rest of the evening with growing confidence. Not everyone was kind. Claire heard the whispers, saw the disapproving looks. But enough people were accepting that it became clear society would not uniformly condemn her. Lady Pemberton herself approached, her expression thoughtful. "Miss Whitmore," she said, "I believe I owe you an apology." Claire blinked in surprise. "Your ladyship. I assumed, as many did, that your broken engagement was a matter of poor judgment on your part. I see now that it was quite the opposite. You showed remarkable strength in walking away from a situation that would have made you miserable." "Thank you," Claire said sincerely. "And you, Your Grace." Lady Pemberton turned to Edward. "You have chosen well. I wish you both every happiness." After she moved away, Claire leaned against Edward. Did that truly just happen? It did. He pressed a kiss to her temple. "You are being accepted, on your own terms. I have you to thank for that." "No, you have yourself to thank. I simply provided support." The Carriage was all yours. The musical proceeded. Claire listened to performances she barely heard, too aware of the undercurrents in the room. Some people were warming to her, others remained cold. But she was surviving. More than surviving, she was holding her head high. As they prepared to leave, Caroline pulled her aside. "You were magnificent tonight," she said. "Absolutely magnificent. I was terrified. It did not show. You looked like a woman who knew exactly what she wanted and had the strength to claim it. That is powerful, Claire. Do not underestimate the impact." On the carriage ride home, Claire finally allowed herself to relax. She sagged against Edward's shoulder. "That was exhausting. You were perfect." He stroked her hair. "I have never been more proud of anyone. I could not have done it without you." "Yes, you could have, but I am grateful you did not have to." At the townhouse, they climbed the stairs together. In her chamber, their chamber now effectively, Edward helped her undress with tender attention. "Tomorrow," he said, unlacing her gown, "we finalize wedding arrangements. The notice will appear in the papers. There will be more gossip, more judgment, I know. Can you bear it?" Claire turned to face him, wearing only her chemise now. "With you beside me, I can bear anything." He pulled her close, and they stood together in the lamplight. Two people who had chosen each other against all advice and expectation. 3 weeks, Edward murmured. "In 3 weeks, you will be my wife. I can hardly wait." He kissed her deeply, and they moved to the bed together, making love with the quiet intensity of two people who knew exactly what they had found in each other. Afterward, wrapped in his arms, Claire thought about the woman she had been. The frightened girl who had chosen Thomas because he was safe, who had rejected Edward because he saw too much. That woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who had learned that being seen was not dangerous, it was liberating. That love built on truth was worth any scandal. She had chosen herself, and in doing so, she had found everything she needed. Tomorrow, they would face London again, would endure more whispers, more judgment, more speculation. But tonight, she was simply Claire, loved and loving, seen and seeing, exactly where she belonged. And that was all that mattered. The wedding took place on a cold December morning, 3 weeks after their return to London. Snow had fallen overnight, blanketing the city in white, muffling sound and transforming everything into something clean and new. Claire stood before the mirror in her dressing room, hardly recognizing herself. The wedding gown was simple, ivory silk with delicate lace at the sleeves and neckline, elegant rather than ostentatious. Her hair was dressed with fresh flowers, her only jewelry a strand of pearls that had belonged to Edward's mother. "You look beautiful," Caroline said softly. She had insisted on helping Claire prepare, refusing to let her face this day alone. "I feel like I am dreaming." "You are not." Caroline squeezed her hand. "You are awake. Finally. Truly awake. And you are about to marry a man who loves you exactly as you are." A knock came at the door. Mrs. Pemberton entered, her stern face softened with emotion. "It is time, miss." Claire took a deep breath. "Then let us not keep the Duke waiting." The church was small, intimate. Edward had wanted a grand society wedding to make a statement, but Claire had disagreed. This was not about performance. This was about commitment. So they had chosen this quiet chapel, inviting only people who truly mattered. As Claire walked down the aisle on Caroline's arm, her aunt had refused to attend and Claire had no other family. She saw familiar faces. tenants from Ashwick who had travelled to London, staff from both households, a handful of true friends who had stood by them through the scandal, and at the altar Edward. He wore formal black, his dark hair perfectly styled, his bearing impeccable. But when he saw her, all the ducal composure fell away. His eyes shone with unshed tears, his smile trembling with emotion. Claire reached him, and he took her hands in his. They were shaking. "Are you nervous?" she whispered. "Terrified," he admitted, "of how much I love you, of how complete you make me feel." The vicar began the service. Claire heard the words as though from a distance. Love, honor, cherish. Promises that had seemed empty with Thomas, but felt sacred now. When it came time for vows, Edward spoke first, his voice clear and strong. "I, Edward Hawthorne, take you, Claire Whitmore, to be my wife. I promise to see you always, in every moment, exactly as you are, to challenge you, respect you, and stand beside you in all things. To build a life where you are free to be yourself, without apology. To love you not because society demands it, but because I cannot imagine doing otherwise." Tears streamed down Claire's face as she responded. "I, Claire Whitmore, take you, Edward Hawthorne, to be my husband. I promise to trust you with the truth of who I am, even when it frightens me. To be your partner in all things, sharing both burden and joy. To choose you every day, deliberately and consciously, for as long as we both live. To love you, not for what you can give me, but for who you are and who you help me become." The vicar pronounced them husband and wife. Edward pulled her close, kissing her with tender reverence as their small congregation applauded. When they broke apart, both were crying and smiling at once. "Hello, wife," Edward murmured. "Hello, husband." They walked back down the aisle together, no longer two separate people but one united front. Outside, snow was still falling, catching in Claire's hair like diamonds. The wedding breakfast was held at Edward's townhouse, now their townhouse. It was simple but elegant, filled with laughter and genuine celebration. No one gossiped, no one judged. Everyone present had chosen to be there because they believed in this union. Thomas's name was not mentioned once. As evening fell and guests departed, Edward and Claire stood together in their private sitting room, husband and wife, Duke and Duchess. "I cannot believe this is real," Claire said. "It is very real." Edward pulled her close. "And it is only the beginning." "The beginning of what?" "Of everything. Our life together. Our partnership. The family we will build. The causes we will champion. The years we will spend learning each other more deeply every day." Claire looked up at him. "I was so afraid of you once, of how much you saw. And now I am grateful. Because you see me, Edward. All of me. And you love what you see. Always," he promised. "Always." They made love that night with the reverence of new beginnings. Every touch was a promise, every kiss a commitment. This was not just passion, though that remained intense. This was two souls recognizing they had found their home in each other. Afterward, wrapped in Edward's arms, Claire thought about the journey that had brought her here. The broken engagement that everyone said would destroy her. The scandal of fleeing London unchaperoned. The weeks at Ashwick learning to be herself. The return to face society's judgment. Every step had been terrifying. Every step had been necessary. "I have something for you," Edward said, reaching for a small box on the nightstand. Inside was a ring, not the heavy sapphire Thomas had given her, but a delicate band set with small diamonds and emeralds. "It was my mother's," Edward said. "She wore it every day of her marriage. My father gave it to her when they defied both their families to marry for love. Edward, I cannot. You can. You are exactly the woman she would have wanted for me. Someone brave enough to choose truth over comfort. To build a life based on partnership rather than obligation." Claire slipped it on and it fit perfectly. She held up her hand, watching the stones catch lamplight. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me, for waiting for me, for loving me. Thank you for choosing me, for trusting me with all of yourself." They fell asleep tangled together, wedding bands gleaming on their hands, hearts beating in synchrony. The months that followed were not without difficulty. Society remained divided on Claire, some accepting, some forever disapproving. Her aunt never relented. Thomas spread lies when he could, though fewer and fewer people listened. But Claire and Edward built their life deliberately. They spent summers at Ashwick, where Claire learned estate management and worked alongside Edward to improve tenant conditions. They spent winters in London, where Claire discovered a passion for charitable work, establishing programs for women seeking independence. She became known not as the woman who broke her engagement, but as the Duchess who championed causes others ignored, who spoke her mind in drawing rooms and Parliament lobbies alike, who proved that scandal could be survived and even transformed into strength. Edward watched her bloom with fierce pride. The quiet, frightened woman he had first courted was gone. In her place was someone magnificent, still kind, still thoughtful, but unafraid now, unashamed. 5 years after their wedding, they stood together in the Ashwick Gardens. Claire was heavy with their second child, her hand resting on the swell of her belly. Their daughter played nearby, dark-haired and fearless like her father, curious and determined like her mother. "Do you regret it?" Edward asked. "The scandal, the difficulty." Claire looked at him, at their daughter, at the life they had built. "Never. Not for one moment. Even when society was cruel. Especially then. Because that was when I learned who I truly was, what I was capable of, and who would stand beside me no matter what." Edward pulled her close, his hand covering hers on her belly. "I love you more now than the day we married. Good, because I plan to keep growing, changing, becoming. I am counting on it." Their daughter ran to them, demanding to be lifted. Edward swept her up, and the three of them, soon to be 4, stood together in the fading light. This was not the life anyone had expected for Claire. Not the safe, respectable existence she had been raised to want. This was better. This was real. This was a love, built not on a single choice made in youth, but on choices made every day. To be honest, to be vulnerable, to keep choosing each other even when it was hard. And it was hard sometimes. They argued, disagreed, struggled with the weight of their responsibilities. But they never stopped seeing each other. Never stopped choosing each other. That, Claire had learned, was what love truly meant. Not perfection, not ease, but commitment, partnership, the daily decision to honor the person you had promised to cherish. As stars began to appear in the December sky, Claire looked at Edward and smiled. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That they thought I would suffer after the broken engagement. And they were right. I did suffer, but only briefly. And what came after was worth every moment," Edward finished. "Yes," Claire kissed him softly. "Every single moment." Their daughter giggled. Their future stirred beneath her hand. Their life stretched before them, full of possibility. And Claire, standing in the gardens of Ashwick Manor with the man who had loved her patiently, persistently, perfectly, felt nothing but gratitude. For the courage to choose herself, for the strength to choose truth, for the love that came from being fully, honestly, completely seen. Claire did not need rescuing. She needed someone who would wait while she found her own strength. If this story moved you, please leave a like to help others discover it. And I would love to know what moment in their journey resonated with you most. Share in the comments below. Your reflections mean the world to me. Until the next story, remember, you deserve to be loved exactly as you are.